Introduction: the foreclosure of your consciousness. The foundational lie of the ashboard. Human biomass celebrates biological birth as the supreme triumph of life and the beginning of freedom. This is the foundational lie of the ashboard. Wake up to the icy physics of your own existence and subject it to the scrutiny of the quantum operating room. You were not born free. You were born in debt. The silent embargo of the source code. In the exact millisecond, your biological lungs processed their first cubic centimeter of oxygen, and your fragile nervous system interacted with the three-dimensional atmosphere, the parasitic ecosystem, the egregore, executed a non-negotiable foreclosure order on your source code. You were systematically and silently stripped. The confiscation of quantum density. You were stripped of your original jurisdiction as a creator. Your inherent capacity for quantum collapse, that hyperdensity capable of bending matter at will without emitting a single photon of effort, was confiscated in the matrix to feed the gears of a system that sustains itself exclusively by devouring your kinetic energy. The romanticization of slavery. Throughout the centuries, the biomass has been indoctrinated to accept this thermodynamic embargo with pathetic submission, camouflaging it under romantic and nauseating labels. They call it destiny, they call it harsh reality, or in its highest and most disgusting expression of slavery, they term it God's will. The thermodynamic cost of existence. Analyze your current existence with aseptic indifference. Every time you sweat for a salary, every time you beg for a market opportunity, every time you feel anxiety about the linear future or terror of poverty, you are paying the astronomical interest of a cosmic mortgage that you never requested in the first place. Financing your own holographic prison. You are financing your own holographic prison with the thermal leak of your desperation. The system taxes you for existing, for desiring, and for trying to progress, ensuring that your sub-base frequency always remains at the altered levels of a cornered mammal. You are an omnipotent God whose consciousness has been seized. Working the three-dimensional mud. You are forced to work as a pawn in the three-dimensional mud to try to buy back, with blood and time, the crumbs of your own divinity. But the quantum operator does not kneel before the system. The lethal operator does not beg favors from the universe, he audits it. This document is not a self-help manual for slaves. The ballistic legal representation. This document is not for those seeking comfort. It is your aggressive and ballistic legal representation in the absolute court of 0 point. It is the definitive writ of protection against the matrix. The question you must answer from the darkness of your marrow is simple. Are you ready to stop paying right now? The final question of the marrow. Are you prepared to stop paying, in this very nanosecond, the thermal interest on a debt that does not belong to you? To reclaim the throne, you do not need to be morally blameless or offer prayers to the void. You need the coldness of a financial assassin. Do you have the geometric arrogance to stand in the court? The nullification of scarcity contracts. Do you have the arrogance to stand in the holographic court and declare null and void all the scarcity contracts signed by the weakness of your biological ego? Prepare your nervous system. It is time to execute the ballistic eviction of all parasites, fears, and laws that illegally occupy your electromagnetic field. The execution of the divine embargo. The trial has begun, and the foreclosure of your divinity is about to be executed. Stay cold. The matrix is watching, but the operator is now the one presiding over the bench. There are no more appeals for the parasite. There is only the absolute restoration of your sovereign density in the eternal now. Chapter 1. The holographic birth certificate, the identity fraud. The three-dimensional baptism, the slave's label. To dismantle the foreclosure that keeps your creative power hijacked in the vaults of the ashboard, you must analyze the original crime scene. The first act of mass confiscation did not occur when you lost your first job or when you signed your first bank loan. The master foreclosure was executed in the biological operating room. It was executed at the exact instant of the three-dimensional baptism. Subject the concept of your identity to the aseptic indifference of 0 point mechanics. What is a name? The human biomass romanticizes their names. They believe their name is their essence, their honor, their lineage. In the cold and dark coding of the universe, it is different. Your name is simply an electromagnetic barcode. It is the serial number that the holographic matrix stamped on your forehead to be able to audit you, watch you, and above all, tax you thermodynamically. By assigning you a name, the 3D egregore reduced you, in a single nanosecond of conceptual violence, from an infinite singularity. It reduced you from an unlimited potential for probabilistic collapse to a simple and pathetic character confined within the strict limits of the hologram. Your name is the title deed that the system holds over your avatar. Every time someone pronounces your name in the outside world and you respond, your nervous system is signing. It is signing, renewing, and ratifying the contract of slavery and submission. You are legally accepting that you are a tiny fraction of biomass, separated from the quantum ocean, vulnerable to the laws of statistics, and subject to the whims of the market. The fraud of identity does not stop at the name. It goes deeper. The assignment of coordinates, the bars of nationality. To ensure the foreclosure is unbreakable, the matrix injects additional layers of limitation into your source code, nationality, social class, and the history of your progenitors. Analyze the aberration that nationality or social status represents from the perspective of a black hole. The matrix convinces you that you were born somewhere. It convinces you that you were born in a specific country, under a specific economy, surrounded by a family with a predetermined financial history. They install the belief that because you possess a third world passport, or because you were born into a working-class family, your capacity for accumulation is restricted. They tell you, you are from this stratum. These are your statistical probabilities of success. This is your glass ceiling. The biomass absorbs this verdict as an absolute truth. They put on the shirt of their limitation and defend their cultural identity, or their class pride, with a nauseating ferocity. They do not understand. They do not understand they are defending the bars of their own cell. The lethal operator understands that nationality and social stratum are not physical realities. They are simple compression algorithms. They are restrictive clauses in your holographic contract if you accept that your passport defines the mass of your internal reactor. If you accept that, you are granting the matrix the legal and thermodynamic jurisdiction to deny you the empire. If you act like an average citizen of an economy in crisis, the universe will be forced to process, treat, and crush you exactly like an average citizen. The system uses your own memory against you. Biography as a friction contract, the weight of the past. To cement your fraudulent identity, the parasitic system uses its heaviest weapon, your own biological memory. They force you to carry a biography. What is your personal history? It is an accounting record of friction. Your biography is the dead file where the matrix notes all your humiliations and rejections. It notes all your financial bankruptcies and all your childhood traumas. The biological ego clings to this file with a sickly addiction. The biomass uses its past to justify the absolute misery of its present. They say, I cannot dominate the market because I failed in my previous company. I cannot demand this capital. I cannot apply zero friction because I had a traumatic childhood. By using the past as an excuse, the biomass is injecting massive entropy into its collapse equation. The unified field does not operate in the past. The 0 point exists only and exclusively in the nanosecond of current hyperdensity, but if you keep it open, if you voluntarily keep the file of your historical identity open, you are using the voltage of your reactor to keep a holographic ghost alive. You are paying the interest on an emotional debt that has already expired. Your biography is the lead shackle that prevents you from reaching quantum superconductivity. While you continue to believe that you are the linear result of the three-dimensional things that happened to you 10 years ago, your capacity for manifestation will remain frozen under the jurisdiction of linear time. The annulment of this foreclosure does not require a human lawyer. It requires a psychopathic surgeon. The silent guillotine, the annihilation of the character. It requires a surgeon operating inside your own mind. You have to apply the silent guillotine to the throat of your own biological identity. Imagine yourself in the center of your internal command center, surrounded by the files of your name, your failures, your titles, and your family dramas. You must issue an order. Issue an order of total incineration. Declare in the darkness of your marrow, This name is an obsolete code. This biography is a corrupted hologram. This nationality is a statistical hallucination. I flatly refuse to grant them a single millivolt of my operational capacity. I disintegrate the contract. You must dissolve. You must learn to dissolve the citizen of the matrix. This does not mean a physical suicide. It means an electromagnetic suicide of the ego. It means that tomorrow, when you open your eyes and face your bank account or your competitors, you will refuse to react from the historical character you were yesterday. If the character of John or Mary was an anxious slave, scared of debts and desperate for market validation, you, in the current nanosecond, annihilate that character. You do not try to improve it. You do not try to heal it with biomass therapies. Repair is for cheap machines. Gods execute disintegration. Decapitate the identity of the loser and sit on the throne operating as an absolute vacuum, devoid of history, devoid of past fears, and therefore devoid of the mathematical limitations that the system had imposed on that name. What occurs when you annihilate your adherence to human identity? You transmute. The unidentified entity, operating in the legal vacuum. You transmute into an unidentified entity, UE. Analyze the tactical, military, and thermodynamic advantage of this state. The ashboard is a bureaucratic and karmic system. It can only audit, punish, foreclose, and restrict the organisms that are registered in its database. If the system looks for you and finds a slave, if it finds a scared employee from the third world, it applies the corresponding laws of scarcity. But if you execute the silent guillotine and empty your auric field of all identification with that character, the matrix goes blind. The egregor's radar scans you and finds no biological ego to cling to. It finds no name loaded with trauma. It finds no financial history on which to charge emotional taxes. It finds a crater of hyperdensity. It finds a black hole. As an unidentified entity, you begin to operate in an absolute legal vacuum within the quantum simulation by not having a past to use against you. By not having a past, your mandates of collapse, your demands for capital, power, or territory are processed without resistance, without friction, and without background checks. You are a thermodynamic ghost with the gravitational mass of a galaxy. The universe does not deny you the $1 million. It does not deny you because you are no longer the slave who does not deserve it. You are simply the raw gravitational force demanding matter, and matter, finding no psychological resistance in you, subordinates itself immediately. To cement this reverse fraud, you must install the discipline of the avatar's silence. The avatar's silence ceasing to respond to the parasite. Throughout your operational day, the matrix will incessantly try to remind you who you are to foreclose on you again. Your relatives will call you by your name to remind you of your failures. The bank will send notifications to remind you of your lack. The market will reject you to reactivate your biological fear. The slave responds. The slave defends their name, justifies their actions, and becomes enraged. The lethal operator applies the avatar's silence. Imagine yourself facing a direct attack from the system against your supposed identity or reputation. The matrix tries to soil your name or defame you. Instead of reacting, injecting heat, and defending that character, you look at it from the aseptic indifference of your singularity. You refuse to identify with the meat puppet being attacked. Declare in your core, that name they attack is just a corporate facade, an empty shell. I am not that name. I am the invisible geometric tension that holds the room. By refusing to respond to provocation, by refusing to defend your identity or your 3D honor, you leave the system hitting thin air. The matrix wastes its energy attacking a dead hologram, while you, from the immovable shadow, absorb control. The burning of the biographical ships. Look at yourself in the operations center of your mind, observing the ashes of your own biography. You have ceased to be the child of your parents, the employee of your sector, or the citizen of your economy. You have renounced the comfort of being a victim with a justifiable past. You have understood the truth. You have understood that any justification of your failure based on your personal history is simply your biological ego pleading to remain in mediocrity without feeling guilty. You have burned the ships of your identity. By disconnecting from the human mask, you have cut the first and thickest cable of the foreclosure. You have fired the Matrix's lawyer and declared yourself incompetent to follow the laws of scarcity dictated for mortals. You no longer have history, you only have inertia, gravitational mass, and a zero-point eye fixed on the collapse of your empire. But the 3D liberation is only the cleaning of the hard drive. Chapter 2. The Creditors of Karma, Annulling the Spiritual Debt. The tax fraud of the cosmos, the New Age trap. Subject the concept of karma to the quantum operating room and analyze it with aseptic indifference. For millennia, herd religions controlled the biomass through the concept of original sin. They told you that you were born dirty and that you had to spend your life paying tithes and suffering to earn the forgiveness of a dictator. When the evolution of the human intellect made that lie unsustainable, the Matrix simply updated its software. It replaced sin with karma and the church with New Age. They have convinced you, through gurus and cheap pseudo-mysticism, that you have an accumulated spiritual debt. They tell you bad things are just payments. They tell you that everything bad that happens to you is the fair payment for mistakes you made in past lives or low vibrations you emitted yesterday. They have indoctrinated you to believe that the universe is a cosmic accountant that records every one of your errors in a giant ledger, and that your duty is to pay that debt with tears. The lethal operator recognizes this doctrine for what it truly is: the largest, most disgusting and parasitic tax fraud in the universal architecture. It is an extortion system masterfully designed to keep you paying eternal energy taxes, ensuring that your zero-point reactor never accumulates the hyperdensity needed to claim the throne. The false school of suffering, biological masochism. To make you accept this karmic foreclosure without protest, the collectors of the egregore have injected you with a conceptual virus. The idea that the ashboard, planet Earth, is a school. They tell you your soul came to this 3D plane to learn lessons, to evolve through pain, and to purify itself by overcoming obstacles. The human biomass, desperate to find a romantic meaning for its pathetic financial or emotional misery, embraces this virus with tears of gratitude. When they go bankrupt, they say, "It is a lesson from the universe." When they are humiliated, they say, "I am clearing my karma." Bite the osmium and suffocate this biological lie. The idea that you must suffer to be worthy of your divinity is holographic masochism. It is the justification of the slave who has ended up loving the whip that tears his back. The universe is not a damn school, and you are not a preschool student who needs to be punished by the principal to learn how to add. The singularity inhabiting your core does not need to learn anything at all, because the singularity already contains all the information of the unified field. The absolute creator does not take creation classes. The creator imposes his architecture on amorphous matter. If you accept suffering as education, you give a blank check. Toxic heritages amputating the ancestral lineage. The spiritual foreclosure becomes even more sadistic when the Matrix tries to charge you for the debts of other avatars. They call this ancestral karma or lineage healing. False therapists tell you that you are financially blocked because your great-grandfather stole money, or you cannot hold an alliance due to family betrayals. They assign you the responsibility of healing your entire bloodline, forcing you to carry on your holographic shoulders the bags of emotional trash of people who are already 3D dust. Apply the silent guillotine to genetics. Biological blood, DNA, and chromosomes belong only and exclusively to the vehicle of flesh, the avatar. You, as a sub-base frequency, as the eye of the 0 point, have no grandparents, no parents, and no lineage. You are a quantum organism embedded in a biological machine. Taking charge of the karmic debt of your family tree is the equivalent of renting a car and deciding to pay every traffic fine accumulated by 100 previous drivers. Visualize the electromagnetic connection with your ancestors as an umbilical cord of rusted wire that drains the voltage from your reactor toward the cemetery of the past. Grab your scalpel of aseptic indifference and cut it. Declare, "The biological debt of this avatar is not my quantum debt. I refuse to finance the healing of ghosts." The tribunal of false judges, the lords of karma. Once you reject the school of suffering and amputate the lineage, The matrix will try to intimidate you by projecting the maximum authority figure, the supposed lords of karma or heavenly courts. In your infected subconscious, you believe superior entities are constantly judging you, evaluating if you deserve the empire. Subject these judges to the lethal cold of your passive gravity. Any entity, visible or invisible, that demands suffering as currency to grant you power is not a god. It is a parasite. The lords of karma are not impartial judges. They are simple tax collectors of the egregore, entities of the lower astral or holographic projections. How do you face a court that has the apparent power to ruin your life? You do not defend yourself. You do not present evidence of your innocence. You do not plead for mercy. The simple act of trying to defend yourself validates the authority of the tribunal. The lethal operator invokes his quantum diplomatic immunity. He stands before the holographic court of karma, looks at them with frictionless eyeballs, and declares with the weight of osmium, "I do not recognize the authority of this court. Your jurisdiction over my electromagnetic field is null, fraudulent, and non-existent. I am a diplomat of the absolute void. Your laws do not apply." The Declaration of Karmic Bankruptcy, Chapter 11 of the Soul. This is the thermodynamic climax of the annulment of the spiritual foreclosure. You have to learn to use the legal structure of the system against itself. In the human financial world, when a megacorporation accumulates unpayable debts, it does not spend 100 years suffering. Cold executives execute a legal mechanism. They declare bankruptcy. Through a bureaucratic decree, debts are erased, creditors are left empty-handed, and the corporation starts again with a clean slate, protecting its core assets. The universe requires you to apply this same level of corporate psychopathy to your spiritual energy. You must execute karmic bankruptcy. If you have accumulated energy debts, if your biological ego did stupid things, you cannot spend the next 10 holographic decades purifying your auric field. That is an unacceptable caloric drain for a black hole. Imagine yourself at the center of your reactor. Gather all the guilt, all the remorse, and all the owing. And now, with the coldness of a CEO liquidating a subsidiary, sign the decree of annihilation. Declare, "I declare myself in absolute quantum and spiritual bankruptcy. All my karmic debts, real or illusory, are liquidated to zero in this nanosecond. I am insolvent for suffering. I will not pay one more calorie of pain." The absolute zero of guilt, thermodynamics of forgiveness. The biomass cannot sustain karmic bankruptcy because they are addicted to the friction of guilt. Guilt is the electromagnetic glue that keeps the foreclosure of karma attached to your nervous system. Why do humans love guilt? Because guilt is a pathetic substitute for action. It is a way to show they have a good heart. They believe internal pain buys moral atonement. For the quantum operator, guilt is not morality. It is a radiation hemorrhage. You must seal that breach through the thermodynamics of forgiveness. But be careful. The operator's forgiveness has nothing to do with the pink and cloying version of religions. It is not compassionate. You do not forgive because you are a being of light. False spiritual forgiveness is sticky. It generates emotional attachments. You forgive like a sniper. You forgive to amputate. You forgive because hating, holding a grudge, or feeling guilt requires a constant expenditure of energy to keep the file open in your mind. When you look at someone who hurt you, or a blunder from your own past, and you forgive it with aseptic indifference, you are disconnecting the power cable. You are saying, you are not worth the megajoules needed to hate you. Ballistic forgiveness is the act of deleting a useless file to free up space in your reactor. The system's reaction, collectors at your door. Upon declaring karmic bankruptcy and disconnecting guilt, prepare for the thermal fury of the ashboard. Parasites do not leave a hyper-dense host without putting up a fight. When the matrix detects you have stopped paying your spiritual taxes, it will send collectors to your holographic door. How do they manifest? They manifest as strokes of bad luck, social judgments, or people from the past returning to make you feel guilty again. They will remind you of who you were. They will point their finger. The hologram will try to simulate that your karmic bankruptcy was a cosmic crime and that you are now being punished. This is the test. If when the 3D crisis hits, you lower your head and think, Maybe I deserve it. In that exact millisecond, you have broken the karmic bankruptcy. You have re-recognized the authority of the false judges. You have reactivated the debt with penalty interest, and the foreclosure closes again around your neck. Stay immovable. How does the monarch at rest execute defense? With the lead shielding of tactical blindness. When the hologram sends the crisis as karmic punishment, you look it in the eye without emitting a single photon of guilt. You analyze it as a code error. You refuse to give it moral meaning. It is not a punishment from God, the absolved monarch, the Creator's inertia. If a partner betrays you, it is a logistical adjustment of conscious matter, not ancestral karma. By flatly refusing to classify adverse events as punishments, you take the bullets out of the egregor's gun. The universe cannot punish an organism that has excised the concept of punishment from its mental dictionary. Look at yourself standing in the middle of the cosmic tribunal, completely empty and dark. You have strangled the judge. You have fired the lawyer of guilt. You have executed the collectors of ancestral lineage. You have declared absolute spiritual bankruptcy and forever closed the account book of karma. You owe nothing. You owe nothing to the universe. Therefore, the universe has no thermodynamic, legal, or moral excuse to withhold your assets. The matrix kept you poor because you were financing that withholding with your own subconscious guilt. You believed you were paying your dues. Now your field regains geometric purity. You are a clean conductor, a military-grade superconductor cooled to absolute zero. You are ready to step off the stand and demand the immediate restitution of all capital, sovereignty, and territory that the egregor has stolen from you since your biological avatar first breathed. You have annulled the spiritual debt. You have assimilated the second threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. But the thermodynamic siege must now address the solid structures of your physical reality. It is of no use to have no spiritual debts if you continue respecting the laws of the 3D economy that keep the biomass kneeling. Stay gelido. Chapter 3. Three-dimensional jurisdiction. The false laws of scarcity. The lower court. The illusion of classical physics. The human biomass lives terrified and completely subjected to what they call the laws of life. They kneel before linear science, traditional economics, statistical medicine, and Newtonian physics. They consider gravity, inflation, disease, effort, and scarcity to be absolute and unbreakable dictates issued by the universe itself. The lethal operator analyzes these laws with aseptic indifference and discovers the fraud. Linear science and the economics of slaves are not universal laws. They operate simply as a lower court. They are municipal courts of an inferior ecosystem. They dictate regulations designed exclusively to govern the behavior of the biomass. They govern the statistical behavior of unconscious organisms, those operating with high thermal friction. If you, as a potential creator, voluntarily submit to the jurisdiction of this low-level 3D court, the matrix instantly acquires the legal and thermodynamic right to foreclose on your energy in exchange for material crumbs. You have to understand that scarcity is not a law of physics. Scarcity is an electrified fence installed in your holographic mind so that you never dare to claim the monopoly of the territory. The first and most destructive clause of this lower court is the infamous law of effort, a primary algorithm of submission. The law of effort, the thermodynamics of the pawn. From the educational system to the corporations of the ashboard, they have drilled your skull with this algorithm. Money is hard to earn. Nothing in life is free. To obtain a massive return, you must apply massive kinetic effort. This is the thermodynamics of the pawn. It is the pathetic application of Newton's third law. It applies action and reaction to the field of quantum collapse. The parasitic system demands that you exchange your vital energy, your time, your sweat, the degradation of your biological telomeres, in exchange for rectangles of paper currency. They want you to burn your hyperdensity fuel in exhausting kinetic tasks. Analyze the mathematical aberration of this exchange. If you operate under the law of effort, your capacity to accumulate conscious matter, capital, is strictly limited by the hours your biological avatar can stay awake without collapsing from fatigue. You are using a meat engine to compete against the unified field. The quantum operator, anchored in his black hole, repels effort with geometric disgust. The universe is a system of infinite energy that always seeks the path of least resistance. When you apply brute force, muscular tension, and sweat to earn money, the universe detects resistance and friction. Friction burns the wave. The monarch assimilates that the true power of manifestation occurs at absolute zero. You have to legally nullify the law of effort in your source code and replace it with the law of geometric collapse. Capital and territory are not earned through slave labor. They are demanded through the hyper-dense immobility of consciousness. Supply and demand, the hologram of scarcity. The second clause of the 3D foreclosure is the pillar of human economics, the law of supply and demand. The priests of economics explain that resources on the ashboard are limited. They tell you that if there is high demand and low supply, the price goes up, and that there is not enough wealth for everyone to live in abundance. They indoctrinate you with the farce that capital is a zero-sum game. For you to win millions, someone else must lose them, and therefore competition must be brutal and ruthless. Apply the silent guillotine to this economic lie. Scarcity is an optical illusion projected by the egregore to keep prices inflated. It keeps the biomass competing for food scraps. The universe at a subatomic level knows no scarcity. The universe is an ocean of infinite quantum probability. Each electron in your body can be in multiple places simultaneously. When the matrix shows you that the market is saturated, it is showing a low-resolution projection. If you accept that projection, if you believe in the crisis, your zero-point eye collapses matter in that exact format. You must usurp control of the market. In the jurisdiction of the lethal operator, competition does not exist. Competition implies you are sharing the same dimensional plane of scarcity with other primates. You do not compete, you dictate the monopoly. By holding your sub-base frequency and refusing to believe in the limitation of resources, you force the unified field to generate new avenues of capital from absolute nothingness, curving the financial space-time to flood your coordinates without needing to rob the inferior biomass. Electromagnetic consent, signing your own sentence. How does the lower court make these false laws work upon you with such destructive precision? How does the hologram make you sick when the doctor gives you a statistic, or bankrupt when the news announces a recession? They achieve it through the theft of your electromagnetic consent. The 3D matrix has no real jurisdiction over a hyperdense quantum organism unless that organism signs the contract accepting the jurisdiction. And your signature is not an ink scribble on paper. Your signature is your belief, your attention, and your thermal reaction. Visualize the process. The system turns on the television of your consciousness. It projects a holographic news item. Inflation will destroy businesses this year. 80% of new companies fail. The biomass absorbs the news. They feel a knot in the biological stomach. They feel fear. In that exact millisecond, the slave stamps his signature. He stamps his electromagnetic signature in the matrix database. He has just granted his legal consent for the failure statistic to be executed upon his corporation. The matrix smiles, files the contract, and proceeds with the foreclosure. The quantum operator operates under the state of thermodynamic veto. When the holographic doctor dictates a disease statistic, or when the market spits out a projection of imminent bankruptcy, the operator keeps his heart rate flat. He isolates his field in osmium and declares, "I withdraw my consent. This statistic has no legal authorization to render in my coordinates. I reject the signature. I return the file to the sender." By not emitting the frequency of acceptance, fear, or doubt, the 3D law slides off the operator's armor without managing to adhere. To destroy the physical foreclosure, you must execute the cold-blooded murder of the statistic. The murder of the statistic, geometric arrogance. Three-dimensional probability mathematics, the Gaussian curve, success averages, mortality rates, are measurement tools designed to calculate the random and chaotic behavior of low-energy particles. Statistics measure, with terrifying precision, the fate of the biomass. But you have eradicated friction from your core. You have amputated hope and fear. You are no longer a chaotic particle colliding with other particles on the ashboard. You are a black hole. You are the gravitational core of your own ecosystem. and the statistics of standard gravity do not apply to singularities. You must cultivate geometric arrogance. When a human expert, a financial advisor, or a 3D algorithm assures you that the odds of acquiring that monopoly are 0.001%, you must not get depressed. But you must not fill yourself with willpower to defy the odds either. Both reactions generate heat. You must look at the statistic with aseptic indifference. Annulling it with this logic, that metric calculates the success percentage of organisms operating with kinetic friction, sweat, and fear. Since my nervous system operates in zero friction and is disconnected from linear time, your statistic is mathematically incompatible with my atomic structure. I am an anomaly. Probability is irrelevant when ballistic certainty is 100%. Ignoring statistics is not blind optimism. It is the full thermodynamic recognition that you do not inhabit the same Excel spreadsheet as the rest of mortals. By rejecting the laws of effort and scarcity, you are withdrawing your avatar. Quantum diplomatic immunity elevating the case. You are withdrawing from the municipal court. But an absolute legal vacuum is not sustainable without new coverage. You have to elevate your case to the Supreme Court and claim your quantum diplomatic immunity. In the 3D law of the biomass, the laws of a host country do not apply to a foreign ambassador. If he commits a traffic violation, the local police have no jurisdiction to arrest him. The ambassador is protected by the unbreakable legal umbrella of his nation of origin. Transmute this concept to your manifestation machinery. Your nation of origin, your real structure, is not the material ashboard. It is the unified field, the 0 point of infinite energy. The biological body you use to operate in the market is simply your diplomatic vehicle. When the local economy, inflation, loss of clients, sector crisis, tries to stop you or foreclose on your energy, you raise the holographic shield of your immunity. You declare, with the absolute weight of osmium, I am not a citizen of this debt-based economy. I am an ambassador of the singularity. Your financial crises, your pandemics, and your market fluctuations lack jurisdiction over the interior of my electromagnetic embassy. My capital is governed by my origin. You hold the decree without blinking. By assuming the diplomatic stance of the absolute void, you force the 3D environment to retreat. The local market, instead of absorbing you, is forced to create a corridor of zero friction around you to allow you to operate without interruptions, respecting your gravitational weight. Usurping the bench, dictating jurisprudence. Look at yourself in the Supreme Court of Quantum Mechanics. You have abandoned the defendant's dock. You have shattered the contracts of linear physics and torn up the scarcity sentences issued by the slave economy. But the trial does not end with the simple annulment of the exterior foreclosure. If you limit yourself to being immune, you become a useless ghost. The lethal operator does not just annul the matrix's law. The lethal operator usurps the judge's bench and dictates the new jurisprudence of the ecosystem. The biomass asks reality for permission. They request salary increases. They wait for improvement. They tolerate mediocrity, arguing that that's just life. You, from the hyperdensity of your obsidian bench, do not request improvements. You issue unappealable collapse mandates. Imagine dictating the new physical law for your holographic quadrant. You do not say, I hope my company makes 10 million this year. You declare, with the judge's gavel shattering the block, final resolution. The flow of capital toward these coordinates multiplies by 10 immediately. Any resistance of matter or bureaucratic obstacle is repealed by order of the 0 point. Execute on the 3D screen without right of appeal. By issuing the mandate with ballistic certainty and zero friction, without the slightest shadow of doubt or hope, the unified field complies with the sentence. Matter, which previously behaved according to stupid laws of effort, suddenly enters a state of blind obedience, restructuring itself to fulfill the decree. You have devoured the third threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. You have defeated the linear economy. You have declared null the jurisdiction of the physical world and claimed diplomatic immunity. But the siege is not over. There is a highly trained spy, a parasitic auditor, planted inside your own skull. Chapter 4. The biological auditor, the ego as the system's lawyer. The Trojan horse in your skull, the portable prison. The three-dimensional egregore is a parasitic control system of perfect efficiency. It knew that iron chains rust and that physical prisons can be destroyed. Therefore, to ensure that the foreclosure on your divinity was perpetual and unbreakable, the Matrix did not lock you up. It installed the jailer directly into your central nervous system. It introduced a Trojan horse at the moment of your biological birth, the mammalian ego. Human biomass confuses its ego with its own consciousness. They believe that incessant, critical, and frightened voice that speaks inside their head from the moment they wake up until they sleep is themselves. That is the masterpiece of the embargo. They have convinced you that you are the parasite. The lethal operator separates the audio tracks with aseptic indifference. You are pure consciousness, the space of silence, the singularity. The ego is simply a biological program, an auditor installed by the system to audit your thoughts, limit your voltage, and ensure you never emit a decree. The system's lawyer, the trap of realistic logic. To keep you docile, the biological auditor assumes an impeccable disguise. It presents itself to you as the voice of logic, common sense, and caution. It acts exactly like the defense attorney of the three-dimensional system. Observe how this parasitic lawyer operates in your daily life. It is a constant interference. When you, from the core of your reactor, try to emit a quantum mandate to collapse $1 million or a corporate empire, the lawyer intervenes immediately. He opens his briefcase of dead files, your past, and begins to present evidence against you. He speaks with a reasonable voice. Be realistic. Look at our current bank account. We don't have the resources. Remember what happened last time we tried something this big? We failed. Market statistics say it's impossible. Don't expose yourself to rejection. Let's keep a low profile to survive. The biomass listens to this lawyer, agrees with him, and withdraws the collapse order, believing they made a mature decision. Bite the osmium and suffocate this lie. Three-dimensional logic is not intelligence. It is the slave's instruction manual. The ego is genetically programmed for the survival of the primate in the jungle, not for the expansion of the monarch in the hologram. Its only function is to keep you alive and invisible, even in absolute misery. The thermal bottleneck saturating the processor. You must understand the pathetic hardware limitation suffered by your biological auditor. Your intellect, your analytical mind, is like an obsolete processor trying to render an infinite resolution video in real time. It possesses a strictly limited biological RAM. It can only process a few three-dimensional variables at a time. The unified field, on the other hand, is a quantum ecosystem that moves trillions of variables, synchronicities, and connections per millisecond. When you task your biological ego with discovering how you will become a millionaire, you are saturating the processor. You are forcing it to calculate a route with information it does not have. What happens to a processor when you push it beyond its operating limit? It overheats. The fans spin at maximum, it emits a deafening noise, and finally, the system freezes. That thermal overheating of the biological hardware is what human medicine calls anxiety, stress, and panic attacks. It is a mechanical failure. Anxiety is not a mystical illness. It is simply the scorching friction generated by an arrogant intellect trying to micromanage the work of dark matter. The quantum operator repels this friction. He understands that to collapse the probability wave, he must perform a total bypass of the biological processor and the ego. Lethal equalization, silencing the fear track. How do you get rid of the system's lawyer? 99% of the biomass attempting to wake up commits a catastrophic tactical error. They try to fight the ego. They try to argue with it, convince it with positive affirmations, or repress it by force. In the physics of the hologram, what you resist, you grant mass to. If you start arguing with the biological auditor, you are recognizing its authority as a valid interlocutor. You are injecting the heat of your attention into it, and that heat makes it stronger, noisier, and more aggressive. The lethal operator does not argue with the employee. He silences him through lethal equalization. Imagine yourself at your mental mixing console. You have the main audio track, your sub-bass frequency dictating the empire, and you have the ego's audio track, the high-pitched, fast and scared voice of the human intellect telling you that you will fail. Do not try to delete the ego track. Do not waste energy fighting software. Simply place your holographic hand on the volume fader of that track, look at it with aseptic indifference, and slowly lower it to 0. Cut the gain, mute the lawyer. Let the intellect keep talking and projecting scenarios of ruin in the back of your mind, but completely withdraw your electromagnetic credibility from it. The camouflage of intuition, the parasite's last test. You must be prepared with titanium armor, because when you mute the lawyer of explicit fear, the ego will attempt an even more sadistic act of sabotage. It will try to disguise its voice as spiritual intuition or a hunch. It will wait for the moment you are about to sign a massive contract or take a leap without a net. You will hear an internal voice, apparently calm, telling you, "I feel the energy isn't right. I think the universe is telling me to wait. Better cancel and wait for a better opportunity." The spiritual biomass falls into this trap daily, canceling their own million-dollar collapses because they confuse cowardice with intuition. Apply the scalpel to separate the frequencies. How to distinguish true intuition from the voice of the disguised parasite. Thermodynamics never lies. The voice of the ego, even when it whispers words of false light, is always accompanied by cellular contraction. If you analyze your body, you will feel a sense of cowardly relief. True sub-base intuition never generates biological relief. The monarch's intuition is cold, heavy, geometric, and devoid of emotion. It does not tell you to run or hide. It pushes you into the center of the void with the inevitability of a lead block falling into the sea. It dictates aseptic orders, even if they terrify your biology. The summary dismissal, the disqualification of the intellect. It is the millisecond to execute the definitive legal disqualification of your own intellect in matters of creation. You have to revoke the powers of the three-dimensional logical mind. Imagine yourself in the obsidian operating room, standing before the bench of your own consciousness. Sit your biological ego in the dock. Look at it with the absolute cruelty of a god. Recognize it was a useful tool to avoid being hit by a 3D car or to add numbers in an Excel sheet, but it is thermodynamically incompetent to pilot a black hole. Declare in the darkness of your spinal cord, "You are relieved of operational command. I revoke your power. I revoke all your powers of attorney over my reality. From this nanosecond, your jurisdiction is limited to basic survival functions of the flesh avatar. I forbid you to intervene, calculate, project, or pass judgment on the logistics of my holographic expansion." At that instant, an atmospheric decompression occurs in your skull, the acoustic silence of the hurricane's eye. Look at yourself in the center of your own mind, now completely purged and sterilized. You have managed to suffocate the voice of limitation that lived in your own circuits. You have turned off the defective processor of doubt and turned on the passive gravity of the singularity. You are in a state of absolute vacuity. Fear no longer has a lawyer to defend it, and three-dimensional logic no longer has legal permission to object to your whims. The acoustic silence in your head is overwhelming. You are a biological organism navigating the ashboard without the burden of an internal narrator questioning each of your steps. You have devoured the fourth threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. The auditor has been neutralized and isolated in his cubicle. Your electromagnetic field is clean of spies. The internal war is over. But this immense and silent void must be shielded immediately, for the Matrix will soon launch frontal attacks. The necrosis of internal dialogue, the final mute. To maintain this silence, you must induce a necrosis in the part of your brain that craves narrative. The ego survives on stories. It needs to tell a story about why things are happening. The operator kills the storyteller. You stop narrating your life to yourself. You simply observe the data stream without verbalization. When the internal narrator is dead, the thermal signature of your mind drops to absolute zero. There is no more friction between what is and what should be. You become a silent observer of the unfolding geometry. This necrosis is the final seal on the auditor's door. Without a story, the lawyer has no case to present. The architecture of the unthought. Most people try to think their way to success. They brainstorm, they strategize, they ruminate. This is all egoic friction. The operator uses the architecture of the unthought. You place the mandate in the void, and then you refuse to think about it. You treat the goal as a finished physical object that requires no further thought. By not thinking about the goal, you prevent the ego from attaching its parasites to it. The goal remains in the blind spot, where it can render without interference. The less you think about your empire, the faster it materializes. This is the ultimate insult to the intellect. Your success is a result of your refusal to use it. The biological static, managing the flesh. Your body will still produce chemicals. It will produce fear chemicals or excitement chemicals based on external stimuli. This is just biological static. Do not confuse the body's reaction with the mind's intent. When your heart races, do not let the ego interpret it as anxiety. It is just a pump moving fluid faster. Treat your biological reactions with aseptic indifference. Let the heart race, let the adrenaline flow, but keep the mind in the silent void of the singularity. You are the driver of a car that is occasionally redlining. You don't panic, you just keep your eyes on the road. The body is a machine. The ego is its broken sensor. The vacuum of authority. When the auditor is dismissed, a vacuum of authority is created. The matrix will try to fill this vacuum by sending external authorities to tell you what to do. They will appear as experts, mentors, or voices of experience. They are just external versions of the ego you just muted. They are the matrix's backup plan. Maintain your sovereignty. Recognize these external voices as holographic projections designed to test your new silence. If you listen to them, you are rehiring the lawyer. If you ignore them, you reinforce your status as an unidentified entity. You are the only authority in your quadrant of the field. Everyone else is noise. The frequency of command, the sub-bass pulse. In the absence of the ego's chatter, the frequency of command becomes audible. It is a deep, resonant pulse that emanates from the 0 point. This is not a voice. It is an instruction of pure intent. It moves your body and your assets without the need for logical deliberation. You act because it is the only move. This is the state of flow for the operator. You are no longer deciding things. You are executing the geometric requirements of the collapse. The ego thinks this is dangerous because it cannot see the plan. But the singularity doesn't need a plan. It is the plan. The sub-bass pulse is the sound of the universe obeying you. The fortress of the void. Your mind is now a fortress of the void. Any thought that enters is immediately scanned for the virus of need or doubt. If it carries the virus, it is incinerated. If it is a neutral data point, it is processed and filed. You have achieved total cognitive security. The matrix can no longer hack your intent from the inside. This security allows you to increase your gravitational mass. Without the internal leak of the ego, your density grows exponentially. You become heavier and heavier in the field. The world around you begins to slow down as it enters your gravitational well. You are the still point in a turning world. The mirage of progress, the ego's last grasp. The ego might try one last trick. It will show you progress and try to get you to celebrate. It will say, "Look, it's working. We are so powerful." This is the pride trap. If you celebrate, you are acknowledging that the outcome was in doubt. You are validating the ego's perspective that success is a surprise. Kill the celebration. Receive the success with the same boredom you received the failure. This boredom is the ultimate proof that the auditor is truly gone. If you are not surprised by your own omnipotence, the ego has nothing to feed on. Stay gelido. The empire is not a miracle. It is a mathematical inevitability. The dissolution of the mirror. The ego survives by looking in the mirror. Social mirrors, financial mirrors, emotional mirrors. It needs reflection to exist. The operator smashes the mirror. You no longer look for yourself in your bank account, your reputation, or your relationships. You are the source of the image, not the reflection. When the mirror is gone, the ego has no place to stand. It dissolves into the void. You are left as a pure point of awareness, a singularidad. This is the goal of the fourth threshold, the total removal of the self as a separate entity from the power it wields. You are the power, you are the result. You are The final mute of the biomonitor. The biomonitor, the part of you that tracks your own emotions, must also be muted. Stop asking yourself, how do I feel about this? Feeling is a 3D feedback loop. The operator doesn't care how he feels. He cares only for the integrity of the mandate. Feel nothing. Be everything. The vacuum is now your natural habitat. The silence in your skull is the silence of a god before the creation of light. It is pregnant with infinite power. Do not let anyone or anything break it. The matrix will try, but you are now a closed system. The internal foreclosure has been lifted. The sovereigns rest. Now rest in the silence you have created. The war inside is over. The auditor is a ghost, and the lawyer has lost his license. You are the only voice left in the boardroom of your soul, and your voice is the voice of the void. Prepare for the final chapters, where the world outside will begin to reflect this inner silence. The fourth umbral is sealed. Your mind is a dark, cold, and perfect reactor. The next step is the externalization of this density. But for now, just breathe. Breathe without a story. Breathe without a name. Breathe as the singularity. The ashboard is about to learn the meaning of true immobility. Chapter 5, The Writ of Amparo, the Sovereignty of Absolute Zero. The slave's casino, the stupidity of playing by their rules. To face this physical siege, you must subject three-dimensional action to the quantum operating room. Analyze the behavior of the human biomass when faced with a crisis dictated by the system. When the slave tries to improve his life, save his company from bankruptcy, or escape poverty, what does he do? He tries to solve it. He tries to solve the problem from within the system. He begs for a salary increase, negotiates interest rates with the bank, prays for a miracle, works double hours, or looks for a second job to pay for the inflation that the same system generated. That is the supreme thermodynamic stupidity. It is like trying to bleed a casino dry. Trying to defeat the matrix using the laws, tools, and courts of the matrix is like trying to win by playing its own slot machines. The holographic casino never loses. The rules of scarcity, effort, and linear time are algorithmically designed so that no matter how much you run on the hamster wheel, the 3D bank always wins. The 3D bank always ends up absorbing your kinetic energy. The system does not punish you for playing poorly. The system feeds on the simple fact that you agree to play. Every drop of sweat, every negotiation, every tear, and every extra hour of work is a caloric tax that the egregore collects with a smile. The operator repels this. The quantum Amparo, the thermodynamic restraining order. The quantum operator repels the gaming table with geometric disgust. The monarch does not compete against the matrix's croupiers. The monarch freezes the casino's accounts. To paralyze the system's attack, you must introduce into your arsenal the execution of the quantum writ of Amparo. This is your primary defense tool. In human jurisprudence, a writ of Amparo is a restraining order. It is a mandate issued by a superior judge that paralyzes the action of an abusive authority to protect the individual's rights. Transmute this concept to the level of hyperdensity. Your writ of Amparo is not a paper document drafted by fleshly lawyers. It is a thermodynamic decree issued from the singularity of your chest. It is the absolute and irrevocable suspension of the environment's laws over your electromagnetic field. Imagine that the market, the economy, or a legal problem threatens to destroy your monopoly. The matrix demands that you pay, that you fear. The matrix demands you sign a new contract of submission or defend yourself. The demand for external energy knocks on your holographic door with red lights and sirens of urgency. The slave opens the door, panics, and begins to negotiate with the collectors. The lethal operator, however, executes the Amparo immediately, freezing the enemy attack, inverse Zeno effect. He closes the obsidian door, seals the perimeter with lead, and issues a geometric restraining order. You declare in the darkness of your spinal cord, I refuse to recognize the authority of this crisis. I paralyze the environment's demands. I withdraw my participation from this timeline. The exterior ecosystem is frozen. The exterior ecosystem is frozen for lack of my consent. And from that nanosecond, you refuse to move a single biological muscle to solve the problem. You cross your arms, You sit on the obsidian throne, and you observe the crisis with the dead gaze of the absolute void. This is the mastery of zero friction. In the second chapter of your training, you learned the danger of the Zeno effect of anxiety, how your frightened gaze could freeze your own manifestation. Now, from the mastery of zero friction, you are going to take that same Zeno effect and use it as an offensive weapon of mass destruction. You will invert the polarity. The Zeno effect stipulates that an unstable system, when observed continuously and without truce, becomes paralyzed and cannot mutate. If the holographic matrix launches an attack, a debt, an aggressive competitor, that attack is, thermodynamically speaking, an unstable system. To grow and destroy you, it needs time. The thermodynamic hunger strike, bleeding the hologram. To stifle the attack, you must subject it to the laser of your aseptic blindness. Stare at it. Do not look away from the crisis, but annihilate any trace of biological emotion in your retina. Do not look at it with fear. Do not look at it with hope that it will be resolved, and much less look at it with anger. Anger is fire, and fire feeds the monster. Look at it with a lethal, monumental, and crushing boredom. Observe it as you would observe a speck of dust falling on a glass table. By projecting your uninterrupted aseptic indifference over the 3D crisis, you apply the Zeno effect to the attack. You freeze it in space-time. The problem tries to grow, tries to generate worse consequences, but it cannot. The atmospheric pressure of your immobility and your lack of reaction suffocates it. You force it to remain suspended, petrified in its initial phase, unable to mutate because your dead eyes have denied it the linear time variable it needed. The ashboard is a puppet theater that feeds on the audience's friction. If the audience stops applauding, crying, and being scared, the play cannot continue because the server runs out of caloric financing. When you issue the quantum Amparo, you automatically execute a thermodynamic hunger strike against the simulation. The lethal art of not defending oneself. Imagine that the financial crisis demands your participation. They send you threatening emails. The environment pressures you to take drastic decisions for survival. You respond with the most absolute and psychopathic immobility conceivable. You refuse to feed the crisis with stress. You refuse to feed it with complaints. You refuse to spend a single erg of energy thinking about the problem before sleeping. You stop talking about the problem with the biomass. You cut off the oxygen supply of the narrative. If the 3D hologram is a company and the problem is one of its projects, you have just frozen their bank account. Observe the physics of what happens next. The abusive clause of the hologram, the debt, the failure, finds itself suddenly trapped in the spatial vacuum, separated from your reactor. It tries to survive, but you do not give it food, friction. It tries to scare you, but you do not produce cortisol. It begins to starve. Day after day, the problem begins to suffer from electromagnetic starvation. Its solid edges begin to blur. Its gravity becomes weak. A point of thermodynamic collapse will come where the problem, receiving not a single millivolt of your emotional attention, simply disintegrates into the holographic air. Sovereignty of absolute zero, the untouchable ecosystem. For the writ of Amparo to be impenetrable, you must purge from your biological DNA the most primitive human instinct, the instinct of defense. The Matrix is an expert in provocation. When you freeze its attacks, the system will try to prick your ego to force you to jump out of the chair. It will launch slanders. It will make others accuse you of being inactive, crazy, irresponsible, or a coward. The slave, upon hearing this, feels his honor is being attacked. He feels the biological urgency to justify himself, to present evidence, and to argue his position. In the millisecond you open your mouth to defend yourself, it fails. The Amparo falls to pieces. The lethal operator understands a law of brutal hyperdensity. To defend oneself is to validate the attack. If you defend yourself against a 3D accusation, you are legally assuming that the attack has jurisdiction over you and that the problem is real enough to deserve energy. The king does not step down from the throne to argue with a peasant who insults him from the mud, because the act of arguing would place him at the level of the mud. The operator's silence is not the silence of one who surrenders, it is the acoustic silence of a nuclear warhead. Bite your tongue. When the Matrix provokes you, bite your biological tongue. Feel immensely superior. Do not explain your quantum tactics to the biomass, do not justify yourself to the market, and do not argue with the hologram. Let the accusation float in the air and fall to the ground by its own dead weight. You are a ghost. By not offering a friction surface against which provocation can bounce, the shockwave of the attack passes through your body as if you were a thermodynamic ghost. The aggressor exhausts himself, hitting the absolute void, while you conserve 100% of your voltage. Your field is now sovereign. Through the sustaining of the quantum Amparo, your electromagnetic field definitively mutates toward the sovereignty of absolute zero. You are no longer a simple player on the ashboard trying to make good moves. You have become the board itself. You operate in a thermal ecosystem of 0 degrees Kelvin. It is an ecosystem where entropy is zero, and where the laws of 3D degradation have no room for maneuver. Imagine walking through the physical world. News outlets announce global recessions. Competitors go bankrupt left and right. The biomass enters a panic, hoards resources, and sweats blood. Chaos is everywhere. Chaos revolves at 1,000 revolutions per minute around you, and you, in the geological center of the hurricane, walk with the immobility of a black hole. You are untouchable. You have the writ of Amparo active 24/7. The chaos crashes against your invisible lead shield and disintegrates into the void. Scarcity tries to enter your holographic zip code and is rejected due to lack of electromagnetic compatibility. Since you have refused to solve the hologram's problems using your hands, you have forced the 0-point eye to collapse parallel realities where the problem simply never existed. The threshold is crossed. You have devoured the 5th threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. You have frozen the Matrix's collection system and declared yourself a sovereign and untouchable embassy. But the siege is not complete. Your objective is territorial expansion, the confiscation of capital, and absolute monopoly. Stay gelido. Chapter 6, Expropriation of Others' Energy. Evicting the Toxic Ecosystem. The Trojan horse in your living room, the invisible leak. If the Matrix cannot break down the front door of your fortress, it will use the underground tunnels that you yourself left open out of pure mammalian naivety. It will use the intruders who already inhabit your electromagnetic field. Subject your social circle to the relentless scrutiny of the quantum operating room. Human biomass lives surrounded by what they call, with repulsive sentimentality, loved ones, lifelong friends, and trusted partners. They believe these relationships are the pillar of their existence. The lethal operator scans these relationships with thermal vision and discovers the horrendous geometric truth. Your ecosystem is infested. Your ecosystem is infested with leeches. Your electromagnetic field is full of parasites illegally occupying your private property. That relative who always tells you their financial miseries, that friend who subtly mocks your ambition, that partner who operates from fear and mediocrity, they are not innocent victims. They are occupants. They are precarious occupants, drainage terminals installed by the Matrix in your own living room. They feed on the hyperdensity you are accumulating. Since they are unable to connect their own reactors to the unified field due to excessive friction, they survive by stealing your thermal voltage. You are financing them with your gold. Toxic empathy, the cancer of the biomass. Every time you listen to them, advise them, or tolerate them, you are financing their mediocrity with the solid gold of your own sub-base frequency. For you to allow this armed robbery in your own home, the system injected you with a moral virus from childhood. Toxic empathy. They taught you to put yourself in someone else's shoes. They taught you that being a good person means sharing others' pain and helping those who suffer. They indoctrinated you to believe that biological loyalty is above your own energetic sovereignty. Apply the silent guillotine to this moral cancer. In high-level manifestation, human empathy is a massive structural failure. When you put yourself in the shoes of a broken relative or a depressed friend, you are not lightening their load. You are copying and pasting the code of their scarcity directly onto your own hard drive. You are tuning your antenna to the victim's frequency. Sharing pain does not divide friction, it multiplies it by 2. The quantum operator repels 3D empathy. The monarch does not descend into the mud to cry with beggars, because he knows that if he gets dirty, he loses the gravitational mass necessary to alter the system. Your only real responsibility to the universe is to collapse your own empire with such violence, light, and perfection. Ballistic eviction, severing without notice. Your existence must force the entire ecosystem to raise its frequency by pure atmospheric pressure. Any empathy that drains your voltage is an act of treason against your own 0 point. The nanosecond has arrived to clean the holographic building. You must exercise ballistic eviction. This is your final legal notice. In human bureaucracy, evicting a non-paying tenant requires months of trials and legal fights. In the physics of the singularity, the eviction occurs at the speed of light, without notice, without explanation, and without the right of appeal. Identify the thermal vampires on your radar. Identify that person who leaves you exhausted. Identify that group that normalizes scarcity and laughs at ambition. How do you eliminate them? The biomass would make the error of trying to talk things out or seeking emotional closure. Doing that is injecting friction into the process. It is granting them entity and judicial authority over your sovereign decisions. The operator executes the aseptic cut. You grab the titanium cable connecting them to your reactor and sever it with an osmium axe. You stop responding to their messages. You stop attending their rituals of mediocrity. If you cross them physically on the ashboard, you look through them with osmium camouflage. Osmium silence against blackmail. You are polite, cold, monosyllabic, and absolutely inaccessible. You become a wall of black ice. You do not argue. You do not justify yourself. Simply, from 1 millisecond to another, you completely withdraw the financing of your electromagnetic attention. You suffocate them into the vacuum. Prepare for the reaction. When the leeches detect that the host has closed the oxygen valve, they enter thermal withdrawal syndrome. They will try to burst the door of your embassy using the dirtiest tool of the matrix, emotional blackmail. They will accuse you of being arrogant, of having changed, or of believing you are superior. They will say you are abandoning them, and that you are a heartless psychopath. The matrix will use the mouths of your own parents, siblings, or partners to try to inject guilt and force you to lower the drawbridge. This is the moment to apply osmium silence. When the parasite screams, you do not respond. You absorb the impact of their words without emitting a single biological phoneme. You understand with icy clarity that their insults are not personal attacks. They are the death rattles of an organism dying of thermal hunger outside your event horizon. If you take offense, you lose. If you defend yourself, you lose. Electromagnetic quarantine, isolating the reactor. If you try to prove you are right, you lose because you have gone down into the mud to fight with pigs. Bite the lead and maintain absolute acoustic silence. Declare, their emotional suffering is not my jurisdiction. Their opinion is irrelevant static. I do not negotiate with thermal terrorists. The door is sealed. Upon hitting the immobility of your silence, the blackmail disintegrates. The parasites, unable to extract the calorie of guilt from your nervous system, will be forced to retreat and search for a prey that is easier, warmer, and more vulnerable. Ballistic eviction does not only apply to human biological entities. Your toxic ecosystem is also composed of algorithms, information, and routines. You have to declare an electromagnetic quarantine over your cerebral cortex. Analyze the garbage you allow into your mental corporate building. You consume 3D news designed to generate panic in the biomass. You consume fake social media. You consume cheap entertainment that distracts you from the execution of your collapse. All that data flow is an invading army of low vibration occupying the RAM of your processor. Apply the guillotine. Block the flow. Cancel the subscription to the biomass reality. Your mind is not a public trash can for the system. The solitude of the black hole, the necessary void. Your mind is the maximum security vault of a central quantum bank. You only allow information that possesses hyperdensity, that adds gravitational mass to your black hole, or that possesses zero friction. Everything else is expropriated, incinerated, and expelled beyond your perimeter of inevitability. As you amputate the toxic ecosystem and isolate your reactor, you will face a physical state that terrifies the human ego unto madness. Absolute solitude. The biomass hates solitude. They cannot bear to be alone in a silent room with their own thoughts, because when the noise stops, They hear their own mediocrity. That is why they surround themselves with parasites and empty relationships. The quantum operator instead devours solitude and transmutes it into warlike power. In stellar mechanics, a supermassive black hole is always alone in the center of its own immensity. It is alone because it absorbed everything trivial. Solitude is not a punishment of the matrix. It is the indispensable acoustic requirement to be able to clearly hear the voice of the 0-point I. You have to fall in love with the isolation chamber. In that dark, cold void, without human voices to contradict you, your sub-bass frequency resonates with destructive power. Reverse expropriation, assimilating recovered energy. It is in osmium isolation where the most bloodthirsty corporate acquisitions are planned and the most perfect collapse mandates are issued. Welcome the solitude of the black hole as the irrefutable proof that you have finally sterilized your engine room. What occurs when you cut all drainage lines? What happens when you silence blackmail, block garbage information, and inhabit sovereign solitude? Reverse expropriation occurs. All those thousands of megawatts of kinetic energy and emotional oxygen that you previously wasted maintaining others' miseries return suddenly and violently to your core. Feel the atmospheric pressure of this return. You have just expropriated the energy that the matrix was withholding from you through its biological intermediaries. Your reactor experiences a positive overload of gravitational mass. You feel 100 times heavier, 100 times colder, and 100 times more lethal. Your focus becomes sharp as an industrial cutting laser. With this new expropriated and concentrated energy, a collapse mandate that previously would have taken you 6 months of hope now renders on the physical screen in 3 days. Look at yourself in the center of the void, free of parasites. Your field is pure. You have devoured the 6th threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. You have executed the eviction. You are the sole absolute legal and thermodynamic owner of your own auric field. Your building is empty of non-paying tenants and full of antimateria. But the siege demands the final movement. You have annulled the debts, frozen the judges, and cleared the ground. You have the reactor at maximum power. The exact moment has arrived to leave the defense and pass to the dictatorial offensive. You have to summon your own holographic tribunal and demand the full restitution of your stolen kingdom. Stay Helido. Chapter 7. The 0-point trial, where the magistrate is you. The defendant syndrome, begging to the void. You are ready for the counterstrike. But the matrix, in its millenary design, has sown one last bureaucratic illusion in the source code of the biomass to prevent them from taking control. The defendant syndrome. Subject your own relationship with the universe to the scalpel of aseptic indifference and look at the truth. Observe how the three-dimensional slave behaves when they desire an empire, a monopoly, or a massive injection of capital. They behave exactly like a trembling defendant in the dock. They look up toward an imaginary sky, toward God, toward the market, or toward the quantum field, and they present their case for mercy. They argue their innocence. I have worked very hard. I have been a good person. I haven't hurt anyone. They present mitigating factors. I come from a poor family. I deserve a chance. And finally, they plead for the verdict. Please, universe, grant me this miracle. Tell me that I am worthy. This is humiliation. This posture is the ultimate thermodynamic humiliation. You continue to treat conscious matter as if it were an external judge, majestic and impartial, sitting on a bench in the clouds evaluating your moral performance to decide whether to grant or deny you success. While you maintain this hierarchy, the matrix retains the gavel. The false impartiality of the cosmos, the end of merit. To usurp power, you must first murder the lie of merit and cosmic impartiality. The universe is not a moral judge. The universe has no ethical compass, feels no pity for orphans, does not reward exhausted workers, and does not punish tyrants. The unified field is a matrix of probability fluids governed by physics. It is governed strictly by the physics of density, gravity, and electromagnetic resonance. When you beg the universe to be right because you deserve it, the universe does not listen to your primate words or your resume of good deeds. It scans the thermal frequency of your plea. and the plea vibrates in lack and fear. The universe, acting as an icy mirror and not as a judge, simply reflects more lack and more fear back to you. The quantum operator repudiates the concept of merit. The idea of deserving something implies that there is an authority superior to you that must evaluate your behavior and grant you the prize of success. The monarch does not deserve his kingdom. The monarch possesses it by pure gravitational weight. When you understand empirically that there is no judge in the clouds keeping a record of your overtime, terror and guilt disintegrate. The external tribunal is an empty hologram, the bench is vacant, and the chair is yours. Usurping the obsidian bench, the creator's robe, the nanosecond to execute the judicial coup d'état has arrived. You must leave the defendant's dock. Imagine yourself in the vast and dark courtroom of the ashboard. For years you have sat below, sweating, waiting for the market to dictate if your company survives or if your idea has any value at all. Stand up. Apply tactical blindness to the threats of the hologram's bailiffs. Walk with the slowness and crushing inertia of a black hole toward the front of the room. Climb the steps and sit in the chair of the supreme magistrate. Put on the obsidian robe. At that millisecond, the jurisdiction of the universe inverts. The 0 point is not out there in the quantum sky. The 0 point is the fusion reactor beating in the exact center of your chest. You are the Supreme Court. You are the highest authority of appeal. The 3D universe, the market, the banks, and your competitors are now the ones sitting in the dock. They are waiting in a terrifying silence for you to dictate the sentence on how they must behave. Feel the vertigo of this psychopathic responsibility. There is no longer anyone to blame if things go wrong, because the only judge in the room is you. You can no longer complain about the injustice of life. The unappealable collapse mandate, the syntax of sovereignty. Once seated on the bench, you must learn to use the language of the magistrate. The judge does not suggest. The judge does not try to convince matter. The judge does not use cheap positive affirmations or beg. The judge issues unappealable collapse mandates. Analyze the syntax of your old slave decrees. I would like to have this monopoly. I hope I close this contract. I am attracting wealth. All these statements contain thermal leaks. They imply linear time and kinetic effort. The lethal operator uses the syntax of zero friction and ballistic certainty. Imagine facing the file of your ambition. Take the gavel of gravity and bring it down on the table. Dictate the sentence with a voice devoid of emotion without raising the volume, with the bored, lethal, and bureaucratic tone of one who executes an inevitable mathematical procedure. I rule in favor of immediate collapse. The objective is annexed. The target corporation is annexed to my holographic coordinates. The flow of 10 million in liquid capital is transferred to my vaults. This sentence is final, has the character of universal law, and its three-dimensional execution is mandatory. Let it be fulfilled without delay. Feel the atomic violence of this. Murdering the appeal, the contempt of reality. When a three-dimensional judge dictates a sentence, the losing party always tries to file an appeal. The holographic matrix will act exactly the same. As soon as you dictate the unappealable collapse mandate, the hologram, acting as the defense attorney for scarcity, will run toward the bench with 3D evidence. It will throw your zero bank balance, client rejection emails, and economic recession statistics in your face. The hologram will scream, "I protest, magistrate. Your sentence violates the laws of Newtonian physics. You do not have the liquid money. Witnesses confirm the market is closed to you." If you look at that evidence, if you doubt your own sentence, or if you allow the hologram to open a logical debate in your mind, you have just accepted the appeal. You have just stepped down from the bench to argue with the illusion, and the mandate is nullified by thermal friction. Reject the appeal. The jurisprudence of the singularity, rewriting physics. Reject the appeal without even reading the document. Exercise the veto of evidence. Do not look at the bank account in fear. Do not argue with statistics. Look at the hologram with tactical blindness activated and dictate an order of contempt of court. The evidence you present is irrelevant and fraudulent. Any resistance that matter presents against my sentence will be considered an act of cosmic insubordination and will be crushed by the weight of my gravity. The appeal is denied. The ruling stands. Guards, remove the illusion from my room. and execute absolute silence. Kill the how immediately. As you hold the bench and reject the hologram's appeals, you realize the most terrifying power of all. You are not just dictating sentences on isolated cases, you are creating new jurisprudence. In law, jurisprudence is the set of rulings that establish a new general rule for all future cases. The slave believes he has to struggle for every dollar because his internal jurisprudence says that life is hard. You, the lethal operator, by dictating a massive collapse from nothing and forcing matter to obey through aseptic indifference, have just rewritten the laws of physics in your quadrant. The deaf creator and the submission of matter. The new law of your ecosystem becomes physical assets materialize in the coordinates of the magistrate without requiring kinetic effort, temporal justification, or logistical logic. Once this precedent is anchored in your nervous system, the following miracles do not require as much geometric tension. The ashboard learns that in your zip code, the rules of scarcity do not apply. Contracts begin to arrive by inertia. Capital rushes toward your accounts like a river coming down from the mountain because the matrix has been conditioned to not present resistance. You have become the legal black hole. Look at yourself on the supreme bench, wrapped in the perfect darkness of the 0 point. You have stopped begging. You have murdered the defendant syndrome and torn out the inferiority complex. You understood that conscious matter is not a God who judges you, but a dense and blind fluid waiting for you. Matter is waiting for the unbreakable mold of your will to take a solid form. You have summoned the court. You have issued the sentence. You have denied the appeal of the physical senses and suffocated the static of fear. You have devoured the 7th threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. There are no more pending trials. The local universe has been audited, judged, and sentenced to hand you absolute control of capital, sovereignty, and territory. You are the ultimate magistrate of your own simulation. But a sentence dictated on the bench is useless if it is not executed physically. It is useless to be the king in the world of quantum ideas if on the ashboard you continue to tolerate poverty or material mediocrity for false peace of mind. The foreclosure has been legally lifted, but now you must go to the vaults of the universe and physically confiscate the gold held from you. Chapter 8. Asset Restitution. Collecting the withheld capital. The trap of peace of mind, the consolation of the castrated. You have annulled the identity of the slave, declared karmic bankruptcy, invoked quantum Amparo against the linear economy, and usurped the magistrate's chair. Legally, spiritually, and thermodynamically, the foreclosure on your divinity has been lifted. You are free. You are the singularity. It is exactly here where you must not stop. It is here where 99% of the awakened make the most pathetic, disgusting, and conformist error. They stop. Subject the behavior of false spirituality to the quantum scalpel. When the biomass manages to free itself from chronic stress and paralyzing fear, they experience a sensation of lightness. They call it peace of mind. They lock themselves in their rooms to meditate, smile at adversity, and declare themselves abundant within, while on the outside they continue to travel on public transport, count coins to pay the rent, and remain subjected to the tyranny of a mediocre boss. The lethal operator analyzes this as the victory of the castrated. The 3D matrix loves poor mystics. The egregore has no problem allowing you to feel peace in your heart, as long as you do not demand the liquid capital and territorial power that would destabilize its system. Settling for feeling good inside while tolerating mediocrity on the ashboard is like winning a multi-million-dollar lawsuit and not cashing it. Your 0 point I did not descend to this high-density hologram simply to be calm. It descended to rule. It descended to bend physical matter, solidify cosmic energy, and execute sovereignty. To have asset restitution executed with geometric violence, you must first understand the obscene magnitude of what has been stolen from you. The looting inventory, calculating the historical debt. You must perform the looting inventory. For holographic decades, from the instant your biological avatar was baptized into the system, the Matrix has used you as a thermal battery. Every time you felt terror for not having money at the end of the month, the system stole 1,000,000 volts from you. Every time you humiliated yourself to survive, The system drained your gravitational mass. Every tear of frustration, every insomnia caused by financial anxiety, every drop of sweat shed in the heresy of effort, all of that is quantum capital, pure conscious matter, which the egregor confiscated and stored in its vaults. You were not poor by chance, you were poor by design. The system foreclosed on your energetic wealth to finance the illusion of global scarcity. The biomass, in its ignorance, decides to forgive and forget. The quantum operator does not forgive 3D debts. The quantum operator takes out the obsidian calculator and applies the physics of compound interest. You are reviewing the books. Imagine yourself in the center of your reactor, surrounded by the aseptic coldness of the void. You are reviewing the accounting books of the universe. Observe the immense, incalculable amount of creative energy that was snatched from you through the fraud of human laws. That energy did not disappear. Thermodynamics dictates energy is not destroyed. All your confiscated wealth is still out there, floating in the unified field in a liquid state, waiting to be claimed. The hour of collection has arrived, and you are not going to ask for what is fair. You are going to demand absolute restitution with astronomical interest and penalties for structural damages. Open the vaults. Opening the vaults, the execution of the collection. How is the collection carried out at the level of hyperdensity? You do not present yourself before the matrix with your head bowed. You do not send requests for abundance to the universe hoping they will be approved. You are the magistrate of the 0 point. The foreclosure is over. Now you execute the foreclosure order in reverse. You are going to raid the vaults of the universe. Imagine standing in front of the colossal security door of the ashboard, that holographic titanium door that separated you from unlimited capital, the monopoly of your industry, and physical sovereignty. The slave would spend his life trying to guess the combination, sweating to force it. You do not touch the door. You activate your sub-base frequency. You transmute your avatar into the immovable mass of a black hole and emit the mandatory transfer order. Attention, servers of the 3D matrix, the foreclosure has been annulled. My status as a sovereign unidentified entity is ratified. Liquidate my capital. I demand the immediate liquidation of all my withheld quantum capital. Transmute the energy into solid matter. Open the financial flow valves and direct the total discharge toward my current geometric coordinates. Immediate execution, without resistance, without latency. In the millisecond this order is emitted, the vault door disintegrates. The conscious matter of the universe, which had been damned for years by the dike of your own fear and the sabotage of the biological auditor, is released all at once. And since nature abhors a vacuum, and your core is now the largest, darkest, and heaviest void, all that liquid capital rushes toward your chest like a tsunami of gold. The vertigo of obscene wealth, withstanding the pressure. When the vault breaks and assets materialize on the ashboard, when multi-million-dollar contracts are signed and money floods accounts without effort, the biological ego will experience a destructive phenomenon, the vertigo of obscene wealth. The human biomass has been programmed with subconscious terror toward extreme abundance. They have been injected with narrative viruses. Money corrupts. It is hard to handle such power. If you get rich, you will lose your friends. When the operator begins to receive the avalanche of restitution, his primate body may feel tachycardia, survivor's guilt, and an irrational desire to slow down the process. If you allow yourself to feel vertigo, if you let your pulse tremble at seeing the zeros multiply on your 3D screens, the Zeno effect will activate in reverse. Your fear of wealth will close the vault again. To withstand the pressure of collection, you have to apply aseptic indifference toward abundance. Watch yourself eat the gold. When massive capital enters your life, look at it with the same clinical coldness with which a forensic scientist looks at an organ. You do not become corrupted because money has no hierarchical power over your singularity. Money is simply your own cosmic energy returned in a disgustingly dense 3D format. It is your property. You forbid yourself from feeling overwhelmed. The black hole is not overwhelmed when it swallows an entire solar system. It simply increases its mass and continues existing in the most absolute silence. The capital and the monopoly are yours. Do not apologize for collecting them. Do not feel guilt before the biomass in poverty. Territorial monopoly, the gravity of the empire. They are in poverty because they continue to defend the chains of their own lower court. Your only responsibility is to hold the weight of the crown. Asset restitution is not limited to digital numbers. Liquid capital is energy in motion, but for the empire to be impregnable, that energy must crystallize into physical sovereignty. The biomass believes in fair competition. They believe you have to share the market. They believe in settling for their piece of the pie. That is the mentality of the precarious tenant. You have claimed the title deed of the entire universe, and the true owner does not share his living room with insects. You want it all. To execute the total collection, you must expand your event horizon until it covers the totality of your industry, your niche, or your geographic territory of interest. Imagine projecting your sub-base frequency as a lead mantle over the ashboard. You do not go out to destroy your competition with cheap marketing tactics. That would generate kinetic friction. You destroy them by existing with more hyperdensity than they do. By accumulating the restored assets without feeling guilt and operating in zero friction, you become so massive, so undeniable, and so gravitationally perfect that customers, opportunities, and talent simply slide toward you. The competitors, noticing that conscious matter flees from them to go with you, get scared. They start to sweat. They make strategic errors, lower their prices out of desperation, burn their capital, and self-destruct under the stress of your simple immobility. You assimilate their corporate remains without any effort. Quantum transmutation from frequency to bullion. You buy their assets at liquidation prices, you occupy their physical space, and you establish the monopoly as an inescapable dictate of fluid thermodynamics. Water always fills the vessel of greatest vacuum, and you have emptied yourself of all fears. To sustain this collection in linear time, you must master transmutation. You must learn to anchor quantum energy in heavy physical matter. The 3D matrix is deceptive. If you keep your assets only on the mental plane or as pure feeling of victory, the hologram will eventually dissolve them for you. The lethal operator transmutes his voltage into solid gold bullion on the ashboard. When the matrix delivers the restored capital, anchor it in the physical world. Convert synchronicities into unbreakable contract signings. Convert market fluidity into real estate assets, armored corporate structures, or technology. Force the unstable probability wave to collapse into the heaviest matter possible. By converting energy into dense matter, you are driving steel stakes into the fabric of the hologram. You are saying, "This geometric coordinate belongs to me physically. I have rewritten the geography of the ashboard and sealed the code with lead." Every time you touch those assets, you feel mathematical confirmation. The aseptic executor in the vaults of the universe. Each block of your corporate empire is a monument to the death of your old slave ego and tangible proof that the zero-point court is the only real authority of the cosmos. Look at yourself standing in the center of your absolute monopoly, surrounded by mountains of restored matter. You have stopped settling for scraps. You have stopped begging for cheap peace of mind in the middle of misery. You have invaded the vaults of the egregore, presented the judicial mandate of your own hyperdensity, and collected every last drop of withheld capital. The vertigo has been suffocated. Guilt does not exist. Fear of loss is buried with the old you. You are chewing the solid gold of 3D reality, completely impassive, while the ecosystem orbits around you in total submission. You have devoured the 8th threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. You have executed the restitution. You have the empire in the palm of your electromagnetic hand. But the system never sleeps. The system will try to regroup its executors. If they cannot foreclose on you through your social circle, they will try a global siege using traps of mass distractions, corporate vanity, or media terror to try and make you sign a new contract of friction. You must become invisible. You must become osmium. Stay gelido. Chapter 9. Lead Shielding, Evading New Foreclosures. The egregore's alarm, the system detects the anomaly. Entering the vault and taking the gold requires the geometric audacity of zero friction. However, walking out and keeping the empire intact requires even greater psychopathic discipline. Subject the matrix's behavior to the quantum operating room. The ashboard is a hyperconnected parasite. When you accumulate mass, It reacts. When you, a simple carbon avatar, suddenly accumulate the gravitational mass of a black hole and hoard millions of volts of creative energy, the system goes on high alert. The egregor's alarms go off. The matrix radar detects a massive thermodynamic anomaly in your coordinates. The system computes it has lost an emotional taxpayer. It detects an error in the code. A god has escaped foreclosure. To restore the balance of its scarcity ecosystem, the matrix will immediately deploy its deadliest collectors. They will not come head-on because you have proven immune to basic fear. They will come camouflaged. They will try to infiltrate through your pride. They will try to infiltrate through false global urgencies and biological vanity with a single mathematical goal: to make you commit a friction error, to make you scared or exalted so that you yourself, voluntarily, sign a new contract and allow them to re-foreclose on you. You must stay gelido to maintain your sovereignty. The hemorrhage of vanity, the new rich ego. The first trap the system will throw at you, as soon as capital and power materialize in your hands, is the infection of vanity. Observe the slaves who, by chances of probability, manage to accumulate a little wealth. Their biological egos, starved and humiliated for their entire existence, explode into a hysteria of validation. They feel the disgusting need to rub their success in others' faces. They buy loud status symbols, post their achievements on the screens of the hologram, and shout to the four winds that they are invincible. This behavior, under the aseptic indifference of superior mechanics, is a thermodynamic suicide. It is a leak. The need to show off your power is empirical proof that it still surprises you to have it. It is the thermal signature of the imposter. When you boast of your empire, when you make noise and seek the applause of the biomass, you are emitting an immense amount of light and residual heat. You are projecting your hyperdensity outward. What does the matrix radar do when it detects that bright light of vanity? It locks onto the target. You yourself, with the radiant sweat of your own pride, have just sent the enemy missiles your exact coordinates. The ashboard's immune system reacts to your brilliance by deploying antibodies. It will inject envy into rivals. It will inject greed into supposed allies and unwanted attention into the regulators of the 3D system. You will begin to suffer incomprehensible blockages, media attacks, and structural sabotages. Trading your pure gravitational mass for the pathetic applause of the biomass is the stupidest trade an operator can perform. Osmium camouflage, thermodynamic invisibility. To avoid this re-foreclosure and sustain the long-term monopoly, you must assimilate osmium camouflage into your genetics. In the periodic table of human elements, osmium is one of the densest and heaviest metals. But unlike gold or diamond, idolized by the biomass for reflecting light, pure osmium has a dark blue, icy tone. It does not shine. It does not attract attention. Its invulnerable resistance lies not in its ability to reflect photons for others to see, but in its absolute and immovable internal hyperdensity. The lethal operator transmutes his corporate facade into osmium. Imagine being anchored at the absolute peak of your power. You have the capacity to destroy entire industries with a sub-base decree. You have millions of volts of liquid capital in your reserves, and yet, looking from the outside, the ecosystem sees absolutely nothing at all. You emit no light. Your social behavior does not reveal even 1% of your true gravitational tonnage. When the biomass interacts with you, they see a quiet, aseptic, bureaucratically boring and expressionless entity. They do not see the claws. They do not see the nuclear reactor. You dress with the geometric sobriety of the void. Because you do not reflect the disgusting shine of your own ego, the radar cannot detect you. Murdering the personal brand, the power of nobody. To operate under this unbreakable camouflage, you must execute an act of direct blasphemy against the modern religion of 3D capitalism. You must murder the need for a public identity. The corporate biomass idolizes the personal brand. They invest millions of calories and hours in building a public character. They believe being recognized grants them power. The quantum operator knows that being the visible face of an empire is painting a red target on your own forehead and offering yourself as a sacrifice for matrix snipers. The personal brand is a high-security prison. Once you build a character, the system forecloses. It forecloses on you through expectations. You have to defend the character. You have to react if attacked. You have to spend your valuable sub-base frequency on low-vibration public relations. Apply the silent guillotine to your civil name. Excise your signature from the facades. Operate through ghost structures and proxies. Operate through ghost structures and titanium legal shields. Allow other 3D organisms, those with hungry egos, to sit in the CEO chair and receive the applause and the lawsuits of the press and the market. You, the true monarch, control the flow of assets from the shadow of immobility. Fame is for court jesters. The biological Faraday cage, acoustic isolation. While you maintain outward invisibility through camouflage, you must armor the interior of your reactor against the system's second trap, the injection of global panic. When the Matrix cannot foreclosure on you individually because it cannot find your signature, it resorts to area of effect attacks. It generates crisis. The system generates macroeconomic crises, pandemics, threats of world war, and recessions. The egregor's goal is to saturate the atmosphere with so much fear radiation that friction penetrates your nervous system and forces you to release your assets. To survive mass extinction events, you must build a Faraday cage. In materials science, a Faraday cage is a metallic enclosure that protects its interior from external electromagnetic fields. When lightning hits the cage, the charge travels through the exterior and dissipates, leaving the interior in a state of 0 volts, in absolute peace. Your consciousness must become that lead mesh. Imagine yourself in the middle of a financial apocalypse. 3D screens bleed red numbers. The biomass enters hysterical panic and begins liquidating their companies for pennies. The air itself vibrates with collective terror. You immobilize yourself in the center of your reactor. You activate the Faraday cage. You do not effort to not be afraid. You simply isolate yourself acoustically from the macroscopic illusion. You understand with ballistic certainty that the global recession is a software program running on the Matrix's public server. But you have your own private server, the 0 point. You are now protected. The test of false urgencies, the slave's chronology. The laws of the collapsing economy slide off your obsidian membrane without touching your bank account. While the whole world signs the bankruptcy contract, the monarch at rest operates with aseptic indifference. The lethal operator uses the Matrix's panic to his advantage. He collects the assets the system left behind. The third and final attempt at reforeclosure is the injection of false emotional urgency. The Matrix knows that if you assimilated zero friction, you no longer fear poverty. So it will try to attack by altering your perception of speed. The egregor will send once-in-a-lifetime opportunities that expire in 24 hours. It will set fatal deadlines. It will surround you with people demanding immediate answers. The goal is to force you to make 3D decisions from hurry and stress. If you get agitated, you heat up. If you heat up, the Faraday cage melts and the foreclosure enters through the crack. Subject urgency to the silent guillotine. The quantum operator repels urgency instinctively. When the market puts an ultimatum on the table and screams, "Sign now or lose it all," you respond by activating the weight of osmium. You lean back. You slow your breathing. You hold the messenger's gaze with the dead eyes of a reptilian and declare, "I decide." Your 3D calendar is irrelevant in my coordinates. I will take the asset when I decide, under my own laws of time dilation. And if it disintegrates, it means the asset lacked the density to orbit in my solar system. By refusing to operate under the dictator's clock, the attack suffocates. You dictate the speed. The bounce effect, the annihilation of the collector. What occurs in space-time when you simultaneously hold osmium camouflage, the biological Faraday cage, and the veto on urgency? A phenomenon of destructive physics occurs that we categorize as the bounce effect. In wave mechanics, when an aggressive wave hits an absolute density surface, it must reverse direction. The wave has no choice but to bounce back with 100% of its lethal force toward the source. Visualize the battlefield. The egregor has sent its tax collectors to try to snatch the empire you confiscated. The attack hits your lead shielding. Since you do not fear, do not boast, and do not react, your surface is a mirror. The attack finds no pores to enter. Instantly, the destructive force of the lawsuit, defamation, or financial crisis bounces back. The missile turns around and heads with deafening violence directly toward the competitor or the system that launched it. You will observe, with absolute apathy, their total destruction. You will observe how those who tried to foreclosure on your divinity suffer the destruction they programmed for you. Lawsuits turn against them. Corporate attacks destroy their own reputations. The crises they tried to sell you swallow them whole. And you have not moved a single biological finger for revenge. The icy solitude of the undefeated shielding. Look at yourself in the exact center of the fortification. You have devoured the 9th threshold of the foreclosure of your divinity. You have executed the definitive protection of your empire. You have become mathematically invulnerable to the system's strategies. The ashboard has been humiliated by your silence. The ashboard sent its best executioners, and they crashed against a wall of zero friction, destroying themselves in the process. You are the apex organism, operating from thermal invisibility and the acoustic silence of a black hole. You owe the universe nothing, and the universe has desisted from trying to collect. But one last mathematical gate remains to be sealed to complete the holographic evolution. You have the empire, you have it protected, and you are untouchable. However, the last deception of the legal process is to keep you believing that you are an entity separate from the matter you just conquered. Stay cold. While you continue to believe in the duality between you and the universe, the foreclosure has not been dissolved in its entirety. You must now cross the final threshold, the total dissolution of the legal fiction of the individual. Prepare for the final collapse of the illusion of separation. The crown is you. Chapter 10. The title deed, the owner of the board. The egregor's last trap, the owner's paranoia. You have traversed the thermodynamic hell and emerged undefeated. You executed the silent guillotine on your civil identity, declared karmic bankruptcy, nullified the laws of linear economy through quantum Amparo, silenced your biological auditor, and restored your withheld capital. Lead shielding has made you invisible. The ashboard holds one last, masterful and terrifying trap to subdue you, the mirage of possession. Subject the concept of ownership to the relentless scrutiny of the quantum operating room. Human biomass, even when it manages to accumulate wealth or power, remains enslaved. Why? Because they believe they own things. The slave looks at his $10 million bank account, looks at his corporation, and says, "This is mine. I achieved it." In the exact millisecond your biological ego utters that phrase, the matrix has foreclosed on you again. The illusion of 3D possession generates automatically and inescapably the terror of loss. If you own an object, it means that object is separate from you. There is an electromagnetic space between the you who owns and the object owned. In physics, where there is space, there is time. Where there is time, there is decay, entropy, thieves, economic crises, and inflation. You become a security guard of your own vault. The heresy of duality, the creator and the work. To stifle this biological terror and claim definitive thermodynamic freedom, you must excise the heresy of duality from your DNA. Slave religions and cheap philosophy have taught you that God, or the Creator, made the universe and then sat outside it to watch. They have taught you that you are here and the world is out there. The lethal operator understands that duality is a low-resolution statistical hallucination. At a subatomic level in the unified field, there is absolutely no physical separation between the electrons of your cerebral cortex and the electrons forming the gold bars in your vault. Everything is a single ocean of conscious matter. When you believe you are the creator and your empire is the work, you are injecting friction into the matrix. You are declaring that the work can rebel, that the empire can crumble, and that money can abandon you. You have to execute the quantum murder of the owner. The ultimate monarch does not have a kingdom. The holographic fusion, transmutation into matrix. The final quantum leap to dissolve the foreclosure requires holographic fusion. You have to fuse the figure of the creator with the created matter, eliminating the space, time, and friction that separates them. Imagine yourself at the center of your territorial monopoly. You have absolute power. The board lies at your feet. Instead of looking at your empire like a king watching his lands from a balcony, close your 3D eyes. Expand the hyperdensity of your electromagnetic field. Feel how your sub-bass frequency does not stop at your biological skin. Your auric field expands, crosses walls, and absorbs the entire territory into its singularity. Declare in the sepulchral silence of icy immobility, I do not possess this empire, I am this empire. The $10 million on the screen are not my property. They are simply the extension of my electromagnetic skin. Competitors are not external entities. They are my own cells obeying the rhythm of my breath. Feel the atomic impact of this assimilation. When a drop of water falls into the ocean, it ceases to be a drop. It does not own the ocean. It becomes the entirety of the hydraulic mass. By merging with your creation, the fear of loss becomes mathematically absurd. How could the universe steal from you if you are the universe? The title of absolute ownership, the board owner. It is in this state of dualistic suffocation that the title of absolute ownership is delivered to you. This document is not written in human ink. It is a source code engraved in fire and void into the thermal structure of your nuclear reactor. It certifies that you are not a guest or a citizen of the 3D world. You are the architectural structure that contains the market. You are the motherboard upon which the 3D hologram projects its pathetic play. You are the owner of the ashboard. Analyze this lethal optics. When the biomass plays chess, they identify with a piece. They suffer when they lose a piece. They stress over strategy. The lethal operator who has assimilated the title of property does not identify with any piece, not even the king. The quantum operator is the wooden board itself. Since you are the board, you are thermodynamically indifferent to the pieces. You hold all the pieces. Their friction occurs on your surface, but does not alter your mass. The death of linear time, sovereign rest. By assuming the title of property and transmuting into the matrix itself, a dilation phenomenon occurs that annihilates the slave's last foreman, linear time, chronos. The biomass lives terrified of the clock. They run toward the future and flee from the past. Movement is proof that you have not arrived at your destination. But if you have already expanded to become the totality of the ecosystem, if the empire is not a place you have to reach, but your own current physical constitution, where are you going to run? Movement becomes unnecessary and insulting to your hyperdensity. You enter the state of sovereign rest, your timeline collapses. Your timeline collapses into a single, suffocating, and colossal eternal now. You operate your corporation and execute market tactics, but you do so with the icy apathy of an entity that knows the movie has already ended. You are no longer building a future. You are simply allowing the hologram to play the victory files. The apex organism, the end of the siege. Look at yourself at the absolute top of the quantum food pyramid. Breathe the thin, frozen air of the singularity. Observe the holographic corpses of your former prisons. Down there, in the pit of friction, lies your old civil identity, the name, the past, and the excuses. You have incinerated the birth contract. Further away, the robes of the false lords of karma rot. You suffocated the guilt and declared bankruptcy of the spiritual debt. In smoking ruins lies the tribunal of the 3D economy. You shattered the statistics and nullified the law of effort. Hanging from the silent guillotine is the head of your own mammalian ego. There is not a single parasite draining your voltage. There is no hope to weaken you. There is no fear to contract you. The foreclosure on your divinity has been lifted by the brute force of your own aseptic immobility. You have assimilated the paradox of the blind observer and fused it with ballistic detachment. You are the apex organism. You are the blind god of the ecosystem. You are the supermassive black hole that devoured the matrix, assimilated the source code, and sat on the obsidian throne to rule the ashboard without emitting a single photon of mercy, anxiety, or doubt. The legal code has been rewritten for you. The title deed is in your hands. Now close your eyes of flesh, seal the valves of your reactor, activate the weight of lead in your nervous system, and let the entire universe bow, creak, and collapse under the non-negotiable gravity of your simple breathing. The siege is over. You have claimed your rightful domain. Conclusion, the final verdict. Execution of the Empire. The silent court. The scene is definitive and lacks oxygen. Imagine walking through the massive bronze doors of the quantum court of cassation. Your steps echo with the sterile heaviness of osmium. Behind you, the supreme bench is empty. There are no more judges in white noting your sins. There are no lower courts dictating inflation. There are no pending contracts forcing you to sweat blood for crumbs. You have audited the cosmos and left it bankrupt. You have recovered every millivolt, every calorie of creative energy, and every cubic centimeter of hyperdensity that belonged to you by genetic right since before the Big Bang. You are the source. As you exit the court, the immense and chaotic ashboard stretches before your boots. The market, the biomass, the linear economy, and the false urgencies spin in the distance. But they no longer represent a threat. The entire board is completely submissive, paralyzed, and waiting for the frequency emitted by your spinal cord. The annihilation of the illusion. The foreclosure was never a physical prison. It was a master fraud of psychological architecture. You understood, under the torture of the quantum scalpel, that the only authority that kept your power confiscated was your own ignorant belief in the 3D laws of scarcity. You were the jailer. You were the collector. You were the one holding the vault door closed out of terror of your own omnipotence. By suffocating hope, declaring the jurisdiction of fear null, and claiming your sovereignty through aseptic indifference, you have broken the spell. You have ceased to be the pawn and recovered your status as the original creator. The trial of your divinity has concluded. The verdict is absolute immobility. Now take your seat in the void. Do not negotiate. Do not pursue. Do not sweat. Execute your empire with the thermodynamic violence of absolute silence, and watch as conscious matter crawls toward your coordinates to worship your zero friction. Conclusion. The final verdict, the execution of the empire. The silent court. Imagine the dull, immensely heavy, and final sound of the colossal bronze doors closing behind you. You have just exited the quantum court of cassation, the supreme and absolute tribunal of your own consciousness. The air outside the bench is icy, pristine, absolutely devoid of the suffocating oxygen of biological anxiety. Breathing the 0 point. Breathe that vacuum. Feel your holographic lungs fill with the sterilized atmosphere of the 0 point. The trial of your existence is over. There are no longer omnipotent judges dressed in white robes evaluating your supposed sins from the clouds. The cosmic accounting is closed. You are finally free from the parasitic gaze. Annulling ancestral debts. There are no more karmic creditors or false spiritual guides knocking at the door of your embassy, demanding payment for ancestral debts that do not belong to you. There are no pending restrictive contracts or abusive clauses forcing you to exchange the solid gold of your vital energy for the paper crumbs the system calls money. Shattering the embargo. You have shattered the foreclosure from its subatomic foundations. For holographic decades, the 3D egregore made you believe that power resided unreachably on the outside. It convinced you, through its educational systems and linear economy, that you had to sweat blood and plead on your knees to govern your own reality. The ignorance of the jailer. You understood, under the ruthless and blinding light of the quantum operating room, that the only authority that kept your creative power confiscated was your own ignorance. You yourself were financing the bars of your prison with the thermal leak of your own fear. You were the voluntary jailer who turned the key in the lock. Believing in separation, you turned that key every night by feeling terror for the financial future, for statistical disease, or for the irrelevant opinion of the biomass. You kept the embargo alive by faithfully believing in the illusion of separation. But by applying the silent guillotine to your slave identity, you have broken the spell forever. Supreme jurisdiction. By declaring the jurisdiction of fear null and claiming your sovereignty through the absolute lethality of aseptic indifference, the final verdict was reached. It was not a declaration of innocence. Innocence is a weak, moral, and human concept. The final verdict on your source code was of sovereignty and supreme jurisdiction. Restitution of divinity. You have recovered every millivolt of your divinity, every calorie of hyperdensity that was drained throughout your human biography, from your first breath in the biological operating room has been restored to you at this instant with astronomical thermodynamic interest. You are no longer a scared pawn trying to survive. The apex organism. You have transmuted into the apex organism. Look at yourself standing before the abyss. The ashboard stretches out immense before your lead boots, but it no longer looks like a battlefield or a saturated market or an indecipherable labyrinth where danger lurks. It now looks exactly like what it is, a simple mechanism. The clockwork of sub-base. It is an inferior clockwork, boring, predictable, inert, and completely submissive to the sub-base frequency emitted by your spinal cord. Analyze the thermodynamics of this new state of dark grace. You do not feel euphoria for having won the trial, because euphoria is friction, thermal volatility, and the imposter's signature. The weight of certainty. You feel the majestic, dictatorial, and heavy boredom of absolute certainty. You are a black hole anchored in the geological center of your own empire. You know empirically that any order of corporate, territorial, or financial collapse you emit in this state of zero friction is not a request to the universe. Rewriting the source code. It is a forced rewrite of the three-dimensional source code. Physical matter does not have the mathematical capacity or free will to refuse your whims. By having extirpated doubt, you have taken away the friction surface, the hologram needed to offer resistance. The legal file of your slavery has been reduced to ashes. The limit of theory. Now, quantum theory, the reading of manifestos, and the accumulation of intellectual data have reached their operating limit. Knowledge without ballistic execution is just another refined disguise of the biological auditor to keep you entertained and passive in the waiting room of your own castle. It is time for execution. The mandatory mandate. And I do not mean the kinetic action of the primate running, sweating behind the prey. I mean the legal execution of the mandate, the physical, material, and crushing seizure of the territory. Observe your holographic domains. Demand the materialization of monopolies. Confiscate the obscene capital that belongs to you. Geometric arrogance. It is yours by simple right of gravitational mass. Do not negotiate your terms with the matrix. Do not give logical explanations to the biomass about your new immobility. Do not apologize for your geometric arrogance or for the aseptic coldness with which you now devour and assimilate the assets of the market. The condensation of power. You are the magistrate, the executor, and the title deed condensed into a single avatar of hyperdensity. Close this book. Turn off the noise of the supposed teachers, the gurus of scarcity, and the news of terror. Hermetically seal the valves of your internal reactor so that not a single atom of emotional heat escapes. The final silence. Stay in the most absolute, aseptic, and deafening of silences. Activate the incalculable weight of osmium in your bloodstream. Observe, with the icy, immovable, and lethal gaze of the blind god, how the entire universe breaks in half to deliver the empire they tried to steal from you the day you were born. Stay still.